in the paper. Then I cut it out. I thought, wow, that's neat. I'm going to make a card. I see. I get flashes of inspiration, and this guy's sitting in the boat in a little rowboat, like almost like a dinghy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful little dinghy sitting there rowing all alone with him on this pristine bay. It said, when you row your own boats, nobody can tell you where to go.
I see, yeah, that's nice.
I thought that was neat.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd
That's
make a nice greeting card.
Yeah,
for
for sure.
somebody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You'll have to take Gordon down and show him your guitars.
yeah. First, I want to ask Dwight about the grandpa and how, when he came up to
Okay, yeah,
Canada, how that came about,
okay, yeah. he
and
knows.
then how he came about moving to Courtenay.
Yeah, we're across the line there, and yeah, he knows, just into
Yeah.
I can
Washington.
tell you, like your grandpa, my dad, was born in Cedar Woolley, Washington.
Right, yeah.
11 children were born there.
Uh-huh.
Now his father emigrated from the old country, like he was born in Dresden, what is now Dresden, Germany.
Oh, really?
But at the time he was born, it was Saxony,
Oh, yes.
or a part of Austria. Austria was, even the Habsburg Empire from Austria owned half,
Oh, I see,
or
yeah.
80% of Europe at one time.
Yeah.
So those country borders have changed, and they're just
Yeah, yeah.
changing all the
That's
time.
right,
That's
they're
why
all
the
back.
big foo-for-all about the Ukrainian borders now.
Right. Oh,
The Crimea deal.
That's right, that's right.
There's a Crimean War where
Yeah,
they fought
yeah.
for years ago, not so many years ago.
yeah.
Was one of the bloodiest battles of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
And they settled down that it was part of Russia. And then after the last war, it was given to the Ukraine. And no wonder these people are now sore about it all.
Sure, sure.
But anyway, that's another thing. Your great-granddad came from that country. He, verbatim, I can remember sitting and him telling me, we played cribbage a lot, telling me about when the rest of the family was already emigrated, they put him on a boat and got him out of the country because there was unrest. And he said him and his dad, people were roaming the street with pickaxe handles trying to lay these people low because they didn't agree.
Really?
And he immigrated from Copenhagen, in the city of Copenhagen, and came with his dad. Part of the family was here already, so he landed. I don't know whatever happened to his dad.
Right,
I don't think they lived very long. He was old when they came.
right.
So he had some brothers
Yeah.
and some sisters.
Yeah.
I knew one of the sisters. So anyway, they landed in New York and moved up into one of the northern states, where he met a young lady whose name was Prevost.
Prevost?
Prevost,
Uh-huh.
or Provost.
Right, Provost, yeah.
She was an Acadian, true Acadian that was displaced from the Maritimes when the redcoats came up and rounded all those people up and sent them hither and yon and gave the land to the Scots.
Right,
They were French immigrants from France.
Uh-huh.
They called them Acadians. They
Right, yeah.
settled Canada in the first place.
right, yeah.
Anyway, that was my grandmother, and I sat on her knee, and she told me all about Acadia, which I only remember vaguely, but I was quite young, and she was an Acadian. She looked like a nice lady to me.
Yeah,
I didn't know what an Acadian was
no,
till now.
right. That
But
was the
anyway,
model of
they
car,
married,
wasn't it?
and her family were devout Catholics and very rednecked in their circle of life, and they didn't want some guy with a bohunk name
Wow.
marrying their Emma.
Yeah.
And so Grandpa said, well, that's okay, I'll just change my name.
Oh, great.
So the name of Clayton was born
Mm-hmm.
two generations back, Gordon.
Yeah.
which your mother was now the
Yeah.
Clayton name is almost extinct now.
Yeah.
I'm one of the last ones.
Yeah.
But anyway, they times were tough, and they emigrated to the western
States.
seaboard,
Oh, yeah.
Bellingham, Washington, and which was in the logging industry then was just burgeoning. You know, the big redwoods down further in California, and Grandpa got a job in a shingle mill.
Mm-hmm.
Lost 2 fingers and decided he had 11 children, of which 6 or 7 were boys. 6 were boys. He didn't want any of his boys losing their fingers.
Mm-hmm.
So he packed his family up and moved to Alberta. Bought a ranch land.
Oh, so Les, your dad came up there
So my dad,
as a boy.
yeah, went up there as a boy on the farm.
Oh, I see.
He was,
I always thought he grew up and then he homesteaded. He went up there to homestead. Oh.
no, they had land, and he was a boy, and he homesteaded right next to the parent ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got married, your grandmother moved up. Well, they tried to make a go in the prairie country where she came from. That's a whole other story. Her line of pioneer line came across and settled in the southern Alberta.
And how did he meet her?
Well, he was out looking for work. In the fall, they would go to these farms that were being run by big steam engines
Right.
and horses.
They would help
And
do the threshing and harvesting.
for the itinerary farm labor, people went.
That's right,
so
like
they'd
Dad
have to
met
hire
Mom,
a lot
like
of
that.
casuals.
Yeah, that's
But-
right.
Yeah,
Exactly
that's how your dad met
Maxine,
my
exactly.
sister.
Yeah,
My
that's
sister
right.
was going to school there
Yeah,
at
and yeah,
Grandma Green's ranch.
yeah, yeah.
And anyway, that's how Dad met my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And
So then they homesteaded.
they homesteaded not far from the Rocky Mountain House between just
Rimby.
At Rimby. Actually, the township was Bluffton,
Oh, Bluffton.
but Rimby was the nearest town.
Uh-huh.
Bluffton was just a railhead. It was 12 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Rimby was 17 or 19 miles,
Yeah.
and we would
So-
get to town maybe once every couple of months with a wagon to get supplies.
So he told me a story once that I think it was when he homesteaded, he went out to check it out, and there was a house on it, and it had windows in it. And then he went to town to register the property and claim it. And when he got back, there were no windows in the house.
Yeah.
And he noticed the neighbors had the windows. And I asked him, so what did you say to the neighbors? Oh, I didn't say anything. We depended on our neighbors, and we want to keep a good relationship.
Sure, yeah.
So I didn't own the property when he took the windows, so I
No.
figured I had nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
Did you know that story?
No, not really. Vaguely, I remember it was a log house, and I grew up in that log house,
I see.
and it probably had about 4 windows.
Hmm.
And the cabin house was built probably by these people that took the windows, because they were probably going to, if you settled on the land and cleared so many acres and built some buildings, the land was yours.
I
That
see.
was homesteading.
I see.
You could only preempt on so much, but sons and daughters in their name, they could do this. So that place was about 2 miles from my grandfather's ranch, and Dad had gone out to work, and probably Brooks were our neighbors, or one of those people had probably started to preempt that land with the cabin or house, and that's how come the window episode. But yeah, so-
He also told me another story. I remember that he was working in some gravel pit or something where blasting was involved. And one day he put his pickaxe in to pull out the stump, and out come a bundle of dynamite that hadn't exploded on his pickaxe. And he said that was it. He quit He never went back. I don't know when he did that, but,
I don't know, I remember him telling that story too, yeah.
and another time he told me he worked for a baker in Edmonton, I think
Yes.
it was.
Yes.
And this guy would bake kosher bread for the Jews, and they loved it, but he would put lard in it, pig fat.
Oh, yes, yes.
And they all
That's why it
loved
was so
that
good.
bread. That was the best bread.
Yes.
They didn't know it had pig fat in it.
No.
And he said one morning he came to work early, and the baker was in the big mixing tub taking a bath. So it was heated. He said he never. It was crazy. Of course, there was no safety inspections.
My dad worked in that. He might have been 17 years old, or 15 or 16. That probably left home. Dad left home. Your granddad left home when he was 15 or 16 years old, and he worked for a farmer over winter, the whole winter, for room and board, and a cow.
Oh,
He gave him
really?
a cow.
Oh,
So in the spring, he's going to take that cow home. However, by then the cow was going to have a calf,
I see.
and his employer said, "Well, yeah, you take the cow, but when the calf comes, you've got to bring it back. That's my calf."
Oh,
Yeah, and he took the cow home and gave it to his dad to start their dairy herd, like to work with into the. He never, the cow was never his. Like he might have got a cow from them when he got married and had this homestead 2 miles from the mother ranch.
right.
But yeah,
Geez.
so then he would have to go out for sustenance and out for work. So Dad went to Edmonton and worked at this bakery. So he became all of our life as children, and all of Granddad, even when they lived here in Campbell River. As you might remember, my dad made bread every Monday morning,
No, I don't remember
the
that.
batch of fresh bread. And my dad Mom was a good cook, and she would help with making the bread, but Dad would, what they call, punch it up. When the yeast rose,
Right.
you had to, it was quite energetic to
Sure.
punch the bread. The more you punched it, the more, the lighter it became, made the bubble small. And it was, when we went to school in Williston Green with this, and took lunches in a jam tin, or a lard pail,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
because lard was cheap and that was a staple on the frontier. We would trade sandwiches at school. I don't know if you ever did this, and you pack your lunch at school.
Yeah.
Well, when you got to school, lunchtime would come, we'd all sit down
Sure.
at your desk or out
Yeah.
outside in the summer,
Yeah.
open your lunch and have lunch, and
Great.
everybody would, all the kids would look at the other one.
It's always better. The
It was-
grass is always greener on the other
There was
side.
a new word they coined at that time. It was chagot. Chagot. Chagot.
What you got? Yeah.
And I could get 2 of those large sandwiches for one of Mom's good bread with blueberry jam on.
Oh,
You know.
I see.
But it was a neat time. Yeah, it was old times. But yeah. So anyway, it's a funny thing, Gordon. As people get older, and I remember my dad. You were talking about record. John Duggan, my dad's 90th birthday, he went to Courtney and sat down with him with his video
Camera, yeah.
and got a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh, great.
But Dad was when he was getting into his 90s, could remember.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
maybe remember what happened last week, but he
Right.
could remember vividly
That's right.
these things from
That's right.
his
Yeah.
early days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
which
right.
is, I don't find that now too
No.
much. I'm not old enough, you see.
Not yet. No, you're only 84, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, in another 6 years, you'll start
Yeah.
remembering that.
Uh,
But
But
so then.
after the war days, like, and you were saying you must have researched your dad's life quite well, because you had that down pretty good. But the part about he met Maxine at her grandparents in Brant.
Yeah. Well, he told me all about that, and I
Yeah.
filmed it all.
Yeah, okay.
When I was here in 2011,
Oh, yeah.
I got an hour and a half of videos, him talking about, because I asked him to talk about
Yeah.
it, and he was happy to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah,
And that's how I knew all that stuff. Otherwise, I
great.
wouldn't have known.
No, well, that's nice, you know, you're kind of a bit of your, what you call heritage.
That's
What do you think
right.
about these
Yeah,
things?
and maybe my children one day would.
I wish
Like-
I'd have known more about your great grandmother, which would be this provost, who was an Acadian and lived. We went down east. I tried to find out from what part of Acadia. Acadia was the whole of the Maritime provinces. You understand? It was the Appalachian Valley, which is where Gordon Allen has gone
Right, yeah.
on the other side of Nova Scotia. The Appalachian Valley is this side.
Yeah.
It's just like the Okanagan Valley.
Yeah, yeah. Grow apples. Yeah.
Peaches,
Yeah,
apple,
fruit. Yeah.
And the French immigrants had farmed that land and built dikes, and for 200 years before the British came and said, "You got to leave now because you're a threat to our
Our way of life and culture, I
Well,
guess. Yeah. Our traditions.
The name, the name escapes me just now. The nationalism of England. It was going to be an English colony, and they were quite nervous because it was just after the British-American War, where the Americans had packed the Britons up and sent them on their heels and said, "This is our country now. We're going to rule." And they didn't want the same thing happening in Canada
Right.
or in the colonies
Right.
north. That's why they packed them all, the French element up, and tried to because there were three main powers in the world in those days. There was France, Britain, and
The States.
the States, which were
Yeah.
growing.
Right.
Spain to a certain extent.
Yeah. And Portugal. Well, Portugal is
Well,
past the.
Portugal was past their
Yeah. Their big,
time of,
yeah.
of exploration at that
Colonization,
time.
yeah. At one time, they were one of the great powers.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
world,
It's funny how, there's a story, and I read just recently, and it's quite interesting. It's a little aside from this, but the eastern seaboard was settled and regulated, and it had, after the British-American War, it had fallen into it had become the states, which were just on the
Yeah.
eastern seaboard. Now, who owned the land up the middle, like Colorado, Nevada, and all those countries? And the center of the world, you might say, was New Orleans at that time, which was still a part of Spain. And the Spanish thought they owned all that country. They'd never set foot on it, but that was theirs because. So they sold it to the American colonies or American government who was forming at that time for something like I think it was something like $2 or $3 million,
Yeah.
maybe less.
Yeah.
Neither one owned it or had any business there. It was still Indian land,
Yeah.
native
Yeah.
land. And these people who didn't own it sold to those people who had no business buying it.
That's right.
It was
And
funny.
then they must have shipped a bunch of Acadians there because all that French influence in New Orleans, that came from Acadia, didn't it?
Yes, when that was a step further back when they dispersed the colony, the Acadian colonies, they sent them, and I always thought they went to New Orleans. That was only one place.
Oh.
They sent them. They tried to get the British, colonies all along the American frontier to take these people. Well, they didn't want them too much, although a lot of them went there. Hence, my grandmother was born in Massachusetts, which was not far.
Right.
That was one of the northern,
Yeah.
eastern
Yeah.
states in the States. So Massachusetts it did take a number of those people.
Mhm.
A number of them were packed up in ships, went clear to what was then occupied by Spain, which was Louisiana and New Orleans and that area. A number of them went back to France. They didn't want to go to France. They weren't born there. People in France resented them,
Yeah.
and they had a hard time there.
Mhm.
And they stayed a few years and packed their tail back to this continent, and,
Yeah.
and wherever they could find a foothold, they took hold.
Right. Yeah.
A number of them just went up to the hills and hid until things settled down, and then come back down and assimilated with the colonies that were us,
Right. Yeah.
took their place. A number of others went up to Quebec.
Oh.
Quebec was still a part. Quebec wasn't so much a part of the Acadia.
Mhm.
It was a French colony stronghold,
Mhm.
and that fight came later between Montcalm and
Right.
Wolfe,
Mm.
the British. Anyway, that's kind of an aside.
Yeah.
A little bit of. I don't totally understand this, but I find it very interesting
Right. Yeah.
to where you come from.
Yeah.
How we got here, eh?
Well, the other thing I'd like to know more about is how Grandpa came to come to the Comox Valley
Okay.
and how you
Okay.
what happened with all you guys. Maybe.
That was because of the wartime. In the, if you remember what they call them, the Dirty 30s,
Yeah.
was actually from in the 30s. I always thought it was part of the 20s. The 20s were pretty prosperous in this country, but things got hard times. There was drought and there was grasshoppers and Lord knows what. It all started in the 30s. That would be like from 1929 to on. And then the last Great War was in 1939. Hitler decided he was going to take over the whole world.
Mhm.
And Canada's economy went totally toward the war effort, which was just coming out of the 30s, which was pretty tough at that anyway.
Mhm.
So after the war,
Mhm.
oh, what are we going to do now? We were living in the prairies on a homestead, which just fed us. You could live on a homestead with cattle and sheep and pigs and make enough to just survive. But
And how old were you then?
14,
Uh-huh.
and there were no schools were farther afield. No room for education, for advancement, to get into the trades or the
Right. Any
professions.
professionals, yeah.
No. So your granddad Clayton had gone up to he'd left home during the 30s to make money. There was the Yankees came up to build the Alaskan Highway.
Mm.
That was a boon to all the local people.
Right.
Went up to work on that highway, and
Oh.
my dad went up there and made all kinds of money because any money was good money.
Yeah.
And he would ship home boxes when they were coming back out with all the equipment, the parkas, the blankets, the things like that were just left. He built big boxes and shipped them home to us on the farm. We'd never seen such bounty of stuff.
Yeah. Good.
That was about 1940. Later than 40. It'd be 42, 41, 40, 42. The war was just gaining momentum because the Japanese invaded Hawaii in 42. And then America got into the war effort, and then they built the Alaskan Highway after 42, okay?
Maybe this is where that
49?
dynamite incident happened when he was
Yeah, it could have
probably
been.
blasted.
Yeah. Anyway, he worked for one winter, maybe 2 winters on that highway. Then the war was grinding to a halt. He came home and he said he had a cousin who'd moved out. He lived in Ponoka, Alberta, and he'd moved to Courtenay. And he wrote to my dad and said, "Get your butt out here. It's a land of milk and honey. You can grow things year round." It was just,
There's work.
yeah, there's work coming on the coast,
Mm-hmm.
construction and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So Dad sold the farm, and we moved to Courtney.
Uh-huh, yeah,
And we started to build a house, and shortly after that, your dad was decommissioned out of the army,
Yeah.
and he came to live with us in Courtney because
yeah.
my
Well,
sister Maxine was there. See?
that's right, yeah,
And they got a piece of land through the Veterans Land
yeah.
Act.
Yeah, he talked
Um,
about that. $7,500 is all it cost him for that,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Could pay off for 50 years,
yeah,
no interest practically.
yeah. And of course, my dad was into, he formed a little construction company with Floyd Conroe, and they were building houses.
Oh,
So I don't think your dad had much building experience prior to coming to the coast. He got
No.
a job with Bramwell and Mason at a garage.
yeah, front end work,
And
yeah,
when they started building his house, or your
yeah,
home that you remember as home,
yeah,
of course, it was his, Larry's house, so he pitched in and he learned how to build.
right,
It was Floyd Conroe and my dad
yeah,
that taught him the rudiments
Yeah.
of carpentry.
right, yeah.
And he turned out to be a good one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, he had a lot of books on carpentry,
Yeah, yeah,
how to do things. He knew how to do all those special frames and things. He had quite a knack for it, yeah.
yeah, he did. He was well suited. Well, you described him really well, and he was tenacious and very careful, you know. And I can imagine him buying books. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he had a whole set of
Sure,
books on
able
carpentry,
to
on woodwork and carpentry.
he
How to,
educated himself.
that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got quite a few of them there. And I remember when I was a kid. And I remember him doing drafting, drawing the plans for
Yeah,
probably the
yeah.
Legion Hall, I imagine. He had that three-sided ruler and
Yeah,
yeah, he knew how to do drafting. He
Yeah.
designed all that, yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Well, you know, as I said in the beginning of my eulogy, I'm coming as a tourist, so I'm only seeing all the good sides,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
I haven't lived here for 25 years, but yeah, you know, he had plenty of good qualities to talk about, that's for sure. He
Yeah.
was very methodical, but yet I realized after hearing his war stories why he was willing to go off on an adventure, you know. Some of
Yeah,
those
well,
roads we went fishing, you know, you
Yeah.
never knew if you could get out of there in a 53 Dodge, and there's no place to turn around, but, well, we'll try it.
yeah,
Sort of trusting in fate sometimes, you know.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
when you grow up like he did up Hay River and we on Wilson Green out in the sticks there, if you didn't learn to do it yourself, it didn't get done because
Yeah.
nobody would.
Yeah,
Sometimes your neighbors knew more, depending what walk of life they came from.
yeah,
But there was a varied walk of life. That was in the 30s, and that's
Yeah.
how the country was built. Like a lot of people had to go to these homesteads and dispersed in the country,
right, yeah,
and they took their skills with them there and shared them, you know. And,
Right.
and they people were neighbors then. Nobody ever locked their door or worried about theft.
So Lorna told me that Mom had a job in workman's compensation,
Yes.
a really good job. She was assistant to the director.
Your mother went, she was a quack, Canadian Women's Army Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and she left home right after she'd gotten to high school. She'd gone to Brant. That was the nearest school after grade 7 from where we went to in a one-room school.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of my siblings went to Brant because there were relatives there to board them, and they were a good school.
Mm-hmm.
Excepting me, I was only 14 when I left home. Anyway, your mother was there during the war, and she joined the Women's Army.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to Ottawa and became a secretary to some. She never went overseas.
Some
but
officer
yeah,
or
she
something,
was,
yeah.
She was quite well versed in secretarial work down there.
Mm-hmm.
She learned there. So when she came home to Courtney and before they married, she got a job right away in the offices in Courtney, and different ones.
Lorna said she worked at Workmen's Compensation.
Yeah, okay.
And then when she got married, because they moved out to the Highland Highway and she didn't have a driver's license, she had to give it up because she couldn't get to town to work.
Yeah,
But of course, they started the family, so I think she wanted to dedicate her time to that, I imagine.
yeah.
But Lorna said the woman who replaced her then worked there and kept that job her whole career, and only retired a few years ago. Yeah, so Mom could have had that if she'd wanted to.
She would have had that job if she'd been able to drive.
Yeah, but
But-
I don't know.
But they weren't interested,
I-
people know that they were interested in raising a family and
That's
building
right.
a home, yeah.
Yeah, and she was very talented in all that she
Yeah.
did, for all the different cookings and
Cooking,
preserving and, you know,
Music,
just,
yeah,
and, you know, I said to Lorna, well, you know, I worked for the government for a few years up in Ministry of Highways, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. I thought I would be brain dead by the time I was 40 if I stayed there. It was so, but of course being in workman's compensation was maybe a little bit different, because she could have probably gone up the ladder, and it was administrative things, so it was different than what I was doing as a mechanic. Yeah. So you came out and went to high school in Courtney then? You,
I started in grade 8 at
Grade 8?
Courtney Elementary,
oh, gee, as young as that.
yeah,
Oh,
and I went through, graduated in 12.
I see.
I didn't go on to further education because there was no money. And I went out to work to make some money,
Mhm.
and that was kind of nice, so I didn't want to go back to
Sure.
school anymore
Yeah, making, yeah,
because I was
yeah,
rowing my own boat,
that's
so to
right.
speak.
And, but, so then you went to the pulp mill in 56, is it 57?
I worked on construction for about 8 years after I graduated
8 years.
from
huh?
school.
Oh,
And I worked with your dad on many projects, local projects, you know. And I had the unique experience of working with my own dad on different projects.
right, yeah.
On some, yeah,
Right.
the Ladore Falls Dam, the Elk Falls Mill, Prince Rupert Mill. I worked there. Your Uncle Roy and I, and your granddad were all worked up there together.
Oh,
On the same project, not on the same cruise, but
right, yeah,
yeah. And,
I see. And then when you got on at the Elk Falls, then you started to take a millwright's apprenticeship, or? what?
Yes, when I could see construction is and still is. With construction, the harder you work, the faster you're out of work because
All
the
right.
job is finished. So you're constantly working yourself
Out of a
out
job.
of a job. And I found this very stressful, you know, because I was looking for something with a future.
More security, yeah, exactly.
I even took a correspondence course in electronics at one time. I never got a job in it, but it stood me in great stead when I had to go to the mill and work. We had in the diagnostic field through the whole sphere of industry,
Yeah,
and to understand, I wired my own houses and
yeah,
things like that. But that didn't work, and so I got a job opportunity to go. I got married, and then I was building a house and had felt a certain sense of responsibility, so I had to have a steady job. And I got a steady job at the mill. I worked there for 38 years.
so how did you get into millwrighting?
Because when I applied for a job, I said, well, I want to be a carpenter. I'm a carpenter. I'll get a job as a carpenter.
Right,
They said, oh, well, that's good, but we don't need any carpenters right now. We'll hire you as a carpenter's apprentice,
mm-hmm,
or helper, as they called it then. I said, well, if I have to start as a helper or an apprentice, I'll start something else that's got more more of a future in it,
Mm-hmm.
which they seemed, I could see these mills
Oh,
being built and starting up, and I felt there was more future in millwrighting.
oh, great.
It was more of a technical job,
Yeah,
and the millwrights always worked inside. The carpenters worked in the ditches in the mud,
yeah, right.
you know.
Oh, good
And,
thinking. That
so
was,
I
that was
got-
very sharp.
So I said, well, I'll be a millwright, and I was phoned the next day, said, well, okay, come to work. So
All right.
I went out there, and I was 25 years old, I guess.
Great.
Yeah. Well, that worked out well.
That sure
Uh,
did.
I was lucky that I retired from the mill before they before it became defunct and shut down, as mills do on the
Yeah.
coast here. The pulp and paper industry has seen its heyday,
Right. Well,
as with the logging industry. And
well, what are they doing for the, who's supplying this market? I know in Portugal we grow a lot of eucalyptus for the pulp industry. But is there no demand anymore for?
well, there is a demand, but it's I guess it's not as big in relation to what it used to be, and a lot of countries that don't have the environmental regulations, they don't have the high cost of power, the high cost of labor,
No.
and Wemyss. Have you ever heard of Wemyss? They've got it's a society that looks after labels on paint and epoxies and anything you use that is fiberglass. Anything has got a label.
Right.
You have to go according to that label verbatim, or you get in trouble with the environmental people or the regulators.
Right.
It's gotten so tight
Right.
that you can hardly do anything anymore,
Right.
and you can't. The movement of materials across borders has
Yeah.
gotten tighter and tighter.
Mhm.
So I believe that industry is going to places where this doesn't affect them so much. Bolivia, South America, China even. We had Chinese people come to our mill. I toured them. I took them under my wing for a week or 2 weeks at a time, showed them the mill and how we did things, and they were writing things down. Now they're making paper in China.
Yeah.
I see them shipping logs to China. Our raw logs off this coast now are going to China.
Mm.
And I've seen videos of their mills there. They don't have kickers and power equipment and everything. They've got a whole bunch of Chinamen handling these logs like the lumber, and pushing the wood through the saws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's archaic, but that's where it's coming from, and they're selling it back to this country.
Right. Yeah.
You know, in some respect, there is still viable mills in this country, but
Yeah.
that